Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sunday service. For those of you that I have not yet met, my name is Brahmacharini Chandrika, and along with my friend Nayaswami Jayanti, it's our joy to share Sunday service with you. And I wanted to start by sharing a story that came to mind last night while I was driving home from my niece's house. And most of you probably know that, I think it was yesterday, was St. Patrick's Day. And this particular niece at one time with her friends had gone to Ireland specifically to celebrate St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. And I wish I could say that it was because of a deep spiritual connection, but she was doing more of the, I think they call it pub crawl kind of thing. Never really asked her a lot of questions about it, but it wasn't from a spiritual perspective. But nonetheless, as I was driving home from her house, and I had intentionally worn green yesterday, because I knew she kind of had the habit of playing the little games of pinching those that do not. And so I wore it, and we enjoyed our time together. But I remembered, the part that I remembered was this event that occurred, and some of you in the audience may have joined me in this event, and I do not know if your recollections are similar to mine, but many, many years ago, the choir went out to a different church. This has happened several times, but we got invited to be the guest choir. And so we went to a particular church that we'd never been to before, and we were, there to sing as part of their service. And not knowing anything at all about this church, never been there before, don't know anything about how their service typically goes, this very sincere and devoted man, pastor of the church, stepped forward, and what he said was, and it was like Bhavani read, he was on the topic today is, well, the topic today is green. That was my reaction. I wanted to laugh. I was like, what? Green? And I didn't know him, so I thought, well, maybe he's got a really wry sense of humor. And so, there's more to this green than just the topic is green. And then he proceeded to list a bunch of things that were green. And of course, with St. Patrick's Day, shamrocks were a good start. And then he went to Kermit the Frog. And then he went to greenbacks. And then he went to green in the gills. And then he went to green with envy. And of course, he tried to bring stories into these. So it wasn't as if the whole topic was just somebody saying green over and over again. So of course, with St. Patrick's Day and green and the shamrocks, he told stories of St. Patrick. And then with Kermit the Frog, if you've ever watched, he has quite a bit of wisdom that Kermit can share with us. And I could only imagine when he started talking about green in the gills that was probably his reaction as a pastor when he got the topic of the week. Because I would look at that, it's like, okay, and that's all it said, green. It's like, here at least we have these, wonderful teachings and readings that are a little bit more complete, and we have resources. But could you imagine getting, okay, today your topic is going to be green. Now, I don't know, maybe last week it was blue and next week it's yellow, but at least to me that was unusual. But I was really polite and I did not chuckle. I just kind of waited for other people's response in the congregation, trying to feel out what was happening here. And was he really going to talk about green? And so, of course, he did. And he did the green in the gills thing and talked about what that means. And then he talked, and this was a church that I found out later, kind of based on his discussion, was that it was based more on the fire and brimstone approach. And so he talked about green with envy and the dangers inherent in the quality of envy. All in all, he did a really good job. I was very impressed with the fact that he managed to bring deep spiritual teachings into a concept as, at least unusual to me, as green. And then at the end of his sermon, we stood up and sang as a choir, and then they did the closing of their ceremonies. Well, unbeknownst to at least me, and maybe most of us, there were two services. And so the first congregation filed out, and about 20 minutes later, the second congregation filed in. And you got it, He's going to do the same exact talk the second time around. And I had a hard enough time keeping a straight face during the first time. And I thought, okay, in order to be polite here, I'm just going to go within. I'm just going to go within and, because I've heard it and I know it was obvious that he started, it was going to be the exact same speech. It's like, okay. So I went into myself and I thought, all right, let's meditate and pray. And immediately, as part of that process, there was an internal vision of how this second service could have gone, might have gone. And some of you know I have a fairly lively imagination at times. So in this particular service, the pastor stands up and he declares, our topic is green. And he invites people to participate with him in naming things that are green. And so he starts off with the things that we've already talked about, and then he says, all right, what else is green? And somebody jumps up and says, emeralds! Yay! Pistachios! Pine trees! Green eggs and ham! They just were doing this, but while they were naming these various things that were green, there was a choir behind the pastor. And every time anyone jumped up and said anything that was green, the choir jumped up from their seats and, hallelujah! And so somebody would say something, hallelujah! And then it caught this energy going. And then, more and more people were jumping up and sharing green and the promise of green and what it meant and the beauty of it. And so you have these people jumping up out of their seats. You got the choir singing hallelujah. And everybody went into this rapturous state. This uplifted, rapturous state because of the shared joy that they experienced with each other through something as simple as what is the power of green? What could that represent to you spiritually? And so I'm sitting there listening to it, and of course when I came out of my meditation, there was nobody jumping up and down and shouting hallelujah. They weren't all enraptured, but it's like, well, it was a fun little vision while it lasted. But the reason I remembered that is because when I heard that topic, it seemed strange to me. It seemed as if that topic might have been something that someone reasoned. Because, of course, our topic is reason versus intuition. And so it occurred to me that someone reasoned that because it was mid-March and it's St. Patrick's time, and because their church was based on a form of the old country, Catholicism, it was actually a Protestant church, but it was based on a lot of aspects of Catholicism, that someone felt that that would be an appropriate topic for that week in March. And so it occurred to me on the way home, it's like, oh, that's what happens when it's reason that drives the process. And of course, it still turned out to be wonderfully inspiring, at least in my own mind. I was enraptured by the second time. And so I look at that and I say, all right, reason versus intuition. And reason can take us pretty far. We do a lot of wonderful things through our reasoning capabilities. It's a good tool to have. But it does not break through into new territory. It's like you lay the tracks, and the tracks can only go together so many different ways, but they never take you any farther if you run out of track. Intuition breaks through that. And intuition, for example, the intuitive flash that Einstein had in the theory of relativity. He had that in a flash. Took him, I think it was 7 years, to be able to translate that intuitive flash of understanding and to put it into mathematical formula that other physicists could understand, let alone the lay people. That took a little bit longer. But intuitive understanding, 7 years of laborious work to create it so that he could share that understanding with others. So that's a powerful tool that intuition has. And of course, on a spiritual path, it's even more so. It is the soul's ability to perceive God. The soul's ability to perceive God. Intuition. And a disciple asked Yogananda, How do we develop that? Can it be developed? And the good news is, yes, it can. But just like any skill that we would like to have, it has to be worked at. And so, one of the ways, as Yogananda describes it, is sit in deep meditation. And after you've done your techniques, sit in that stillness as long as you possibly can. Because in that stillness, or in the light that you perceive at the point between the eyebrows, in the love or the joy in your heart, in the sound of Om reverberating through your being, those are where we touch the divine and where intuition blossoms. And so in your meditations, be sure to sit afterwards and draw that to you. The other part of intuition that's important is that you need to work with it. In other words, you need to actively participate with your intuitive responses that you receive. And I was reading over this week a lot of stories. Most of you have probably heard of the story, Love and Protected by Asha Prever, Nayaswami Asha. And there were lots and lots of stories in there. And interestingly enough, there were quite a few stories where at first the devotee, they received a flash of intuition, guidance, what do I do in this situation? How do I get through this? What do I need to do next? And they didn't like the answer. They did not like the answer at all. And so they said, no, I don't think so. I don't want to do that. And, then you hear the rest of the story, which is, things didn't go very well once they rejected the intuitive response from the divine. And so they had to go through a few more tests until they finally said, time out, okay, let's try this again. What do you want me to do? And of course, that's very common for all of us, is that sometimes we put it out there and we get a response and then we go, what do I make of that? How do I even do that? And we need to develop a fine tune to the process of intuition. Because of course it is also true that sometimes we aren't sure if it's really intuition or just our own desires. Because sometimes we preset the board and we have a certain desire, a certain outcome, a certain way that it should work, and we put it out there and we say to the divine, okay, this is what I want. And then in your meditation, if you seem to get a whisper of that back, it's like, see, the Guru wants me to do this. I can't tell you how many times I've talked with people and they've said that, and they have this excitement about it. But for those of you that have worked with intuition, true intuition has a calm, deep, peaceful experience with it. And the excitement aspect of it is often our ego desire. It's tricky, very tricky. I always trust my intuition when I have absolutely no idea what it is. So you ask a question, it tells you, well, the answer is Ayurveda. And at the time I didn't know what Ayurveda was. And so I went, well, what do I do with that? How do I find out Ayurveda? But at least I knew it was not my own egoic desires that were pushing me in that direction, because I would never have thought of that at all. And so you get to figure out for yourself, how do you work with your own intuition? But the trick is, try it. Work with it on the little things. Just like any new skill, work with it with something that you're likely to be potentially successful at. Not the big, life-changing, threatening things, but the little things. Many years ago, when I was a brand new devotee, I was looking for furniture for my home, and I wanted to have a wardrobe for my bedroom. And I had gone out several different times to the various furniture shops and looking for, I had something in my mind, very clear picture of what I wanted. But every time I went in, they had other things. They were bigger, they were bulkier, they were made of oak. I wanted walnut. They're just the little things I couldn't find what I wanted. So one day, I think it was a Sunday afternoon, I had a little bit of time. And I said, okay, well, let's try, shopping again. But this time, and I was trying to get in the habit of this time I said, okay, God, you're coming along with me. Where are we going? And I got this immediate response, which floored me, because it was like, wow, really? Fast? That fast? Because usually it took a while, and it took me a while to understand whatever flashes of intuition I might have had. But I got a real clear answer. Go to Weinstock's. Yeah, Weinstock's for furniture? Who knew? I was like, do they even have furniture? went there regularly for clothing, and I knew they had small appliances, but furniture? I thought, well, okay, I'm going to try this, might as well try it. So I drive out to Weinstock's, and I get there, and I look at the escalator, and you know how they have the signs posted about what's on what floor? And I'd never been on the 4th floor before, but sure enough, 4th floor furniture. I go upstairs, and I poke, and the landing was, the light bulbs had burned out, so it was this dark landing. But down the ways, a little way, there was a light, which is where they had the furniture. So I wandered over there, and I turned a corner, and I just stopped in astonishment. Because right there was the very image of the wardrobe that I had seen in my mind's eye. I mean, it was the right material, it was classically shaped, it had a bar for hanging, clothes up, it had a drawer, it had, shelves, adjustable shelves. It was astoundingly beautiful. And it was just right there. And I'm kind of looking at that, just kind of taking that moment in, going, whoa, what do I make of this? And, when I'd walked into that room, a big room of furniture, there was none other soul in sight. I was the only person in the room. And then when I started to turn the tag over to see how much this wardrobe was, a salesperson joined me. Oh, can I tell you about the wardrobe? And so I let them tell me a little bit about it and the workmanship and the company and all of that. And while they were talking, I turned it over and looked at the price. And it was considerably more than what I had hoped to pay for a wardrobe. And looking at that, I was like, and they saw the look on my face. Oh, don't worry, honey, don't worry. Everything is 50% off through tonight. So there I am, perfect wardrobe, just what I wanted, half off, definitely now within my budget, and they would deliver for free on any time that I chose. I think God did a pretty good job on that little wardrobe, And so, use it on little things because you just never know. And of course, what we have to do is you have to trust it and work with it because sometimes we don't know why. Driving down the road, you have a destination in mind, you know the fastest way to get there, and you're cruising along, the next thing you know, it says, turn right. It's like, but I'm going over there, I don't want to turn right. Turn right, and you turn right, you don't know. Maybe, you turn the news on in the evening and you find out that there was an accident on the street that you were on and it was all congested, or maybe right when you had been going through there, you might have been caught up in that accident. Sometimes you have absolutely no idea. And see, that's the thing about intuition. Work with it and trust it. Sometimes you will have feedback that gives you information that you're on the right track. Other times, it's just a matter of cooperating with the divine. Getting in the habit of cooperating whether you understand why or not, whether you have confirmation of anything or not. Because intuition is the soul's ability to know God. And of course, that's one of the things we're looking for, is the ability to know God. And as we work with that, we have to remember that, as was read, our intellect only really comes to clarity when it is united in the depth of meditation with divine contact. Then it has clarity. Otherwise, sometimes we just swim around. We swim around in circles going, but this is a choice, and that is a choice, and this is, and we don't know we just get all wound up. We don't know how to unwind. But with intuitive perception, we do unwind, and we go direct to the source. And so, encouraging you to play with it. Don't take it too seriously. I mean, there will be times when you need to use it very seriously. But for the most part, day-by-day things, come on, God, let's come along with this trip. Let's see if you can make this much better than it would be if I was just doing it myself. In the process of reading up on stories, I came across one that really touched me. For a variety of reasons, and of course the topic was about intuition. And it was a story from some friends that live in Nevada City, the Ananda village, and they routinely go out and do programs in other locations. And they were scheduled to do a weekend trip in LA. And as the author puts it, that particular weekend, barreling down on Northern California was the biggest storm we'd seen in 50 years. And some of you might remember this storm. But anyway, they were supposed to travel. And they had, it was a Friday that they were going to be leaving to go down to LA. And that was exactly when the height of the storm was coming into Northern California. And so they were a little unsure of this plan. They had tickets to fly from Sacramento Airport down to LA at 9:30 in the morning Friday. And neither one of them are comfortable flyers. In fact, they're kind of hesitant flyers, and they weren't looking forward to flying on a plane. And so they kind of thought, well, maybe we should drive. Maybe we should get in our car and drive, 10 hours or so to go there. And when they were in the process of trying to figure out this decision, they said, wait a minute, if in doubt, meditate. It's always a good rule to hold in mind. If in doubt, meditate. So that's what they did. And she put out this question to the divine, and she says, should we drive or should we fly? And she really wanted to drive. She didn't want anything to do with an airplane with a big storm coming in. And so they meditated for a while. And sure enough, the answer came back very clear, fly! And she's going, and she goes, back to meditation. And she'll, if I meditate a little bit longer, maybe I'll get a different answer than she asked again. Fly! The friendly skies. And so, they talk to her husband. She says, well, this is the answer I got. And he goes, well, did he tell you what time? What time to fly? Because then they thought, well, okay, if it's fly, then maybe we should fly earlier. And so, they were, again, hedging their bets. They said, okay, we'll call the travel agent or the airline or whatever, and we'll see if we can change our time. And as many of you know, with airlines, oftentimes if you change the time of your flight, they charge you fees, sometimes big fees. So she called, and she goes, well, God, if it's your will that we go at this time and change our flight and we truly fly, then you'll waive the fees. This little negotiation thing, really? Can't we drive? And so she talks to the agent, and the agent says, oh, sure, no problem, we'll waive the fees. Yeah, we got you now for the 6 a.m. flight. So they leave their house at 2:30 in the morning, Friday morning, and they drive through the storm, and it's raining hard, and the wind is buffeting the car around, and it's hailing, and lightning strikes, and all that kind of stuff. They get safely to Sacramento Airport, and they actually get on their plane. Well, they're greeted by the pilot saying, just fair warning, folks, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And because it's going to be such a bumpy ride, what we want you to do is to sit. The plane wasn't very full, so they could tell people where the safest seats were. And they said, well, the safest seats are near the wings. So, please sit in those if you're the least bit worried about it. And because it's so bumpy, there will not be any drink or snack service on this plane because we want to keep our stewardesses safe as well. So they taxi down the airport, thunder, lightning, hail, wind. And I don't know if you've ever been on the planes where they kind of crab taxi. That's what my dad calls it. He's a pilot. And if you get strong crosswinds, the plane goes sideways. And if you get crosswinds going both ways, you literally do a path like this down the runway as you're trying to take off. And so they get airborne, and the wing goes like this, and the wing goes like that. And so if you're looking out the window of the wing, you've seen the ground come closer to you and then go away, and come closer and go away. That's your experience in a heavy wind like that. Anyway, they get airborne, and she's praying. She doesn't want to talk to anybody. She's just praying desperately to be safe on this trip. And she goes, God and Guru, you put me on this plane. You got to take care of us now. You got to take care of us now. We followed you. We said, oh, we're flying, all right. So there they are. And, of course, they're rising in altitude. And she prays, and she gets still. She's practicing a pranayama, a breath control, to control her anxiety. And then she gets a message. And you guys have heard this message many times, those of you that have attended the Festival of Light. Because part of the Festival of Light is that little story of the bird. And the bird sometimes gets caught up in buffeting winds and huge storms. And what does the wind tell it? It says, let me, surrender, and let me give you my strength that I can add to your own. So she's trying to relax into that. And the plane is still flying higher. And suddenly, they move beyond the storm. They're flying south, so they move beyond the storm, and they get above the clouds. And then she laughed to herself, because one of the promises that the wind says, when it says, "Let me lend my strength to yours," and then suddenly the little bird found itself soaring high above the clouds, joyously high above the clouds. And there she was, in this plane, high above the clouds, smooth sailing all the rest of the way down to LA. No troubles whatsoever. But it was just so fun for her to perceive through the intuition and the understanding and the talking with the divine that they were going to be just fine. And there she was. And interestingly enough, and this is the part that just really made me go, oh, I got to tell this story. Because what was the topic of their weekend down there in LA? How to know and trust your intuition. So, blessings upon you, and good luck with your own explorations into your intuitive perceptions. And may you be one of those people that when you get guidance, you test it out rather than just pushing it away. Because some of these other stories I heard where people got a very clear answer and didn't want to go that way, their stories were a lot more harrowing than this particular one. And so many blessings upon you.